Hello, wrestling friends. I'm Matt Kuhn, and this is the Gentleman Villain Podcast with William Regal, the man's man. Mr. Regal, it is our 4th episode. How are you finding this podcast experience?
It's been lovely. I'm having a whale of a time. It's I don't know. I look forward to this because it just gets to get talking about a lot of my life and a lot of things going on, and I'm just enjoying it. And it's something different for me. Very different to be not in character, which is something I've tried to stay away from my entire
Right.
career. Is not to just be as me as I can be, and that's a nice thing, and to just talk wrestling, which is what I do, So
Do you find it harder to be yourself on camera, to be out of character? Are you more
yes,
comfortable doing a character?
you will see me right. So the lessons start.
Right.
One thing that I teach, or I don't like to say I teach, I help people with, or I used to, especially, was with promos. And you wouldn't think, listening to me the way I am now, it is a very, very awkward thing for me to do. This is very awkward for me to do, to just sit and be me and talk. When the red light goes on, I turn into whatever really William Regal needs to be, or whatever I've portrayed over the years. But one of the things I do teach or tell people is to learn real body language. And because a lot of people don't know that, and they do what I call wrestler things. There's a lot of wrestler sayings I tell people to avoid. Let me tell you something, you see, all these things, they're just wasted seconds. If you've got a 30-second promo or a minute promo and you say, you see, or let me tell you something, or, a couple of times in that, you've eaten 15 seconds of your promo where you could be getting your own point across, or putting your opponent over. And also body language, knowing how to, what you're seeing now is me, and I'm a bit awkward doing this as myself. But you see people doing unnatural things when they're trying to look a certain way. So there's ways, I'm sure there's stuff on YouTube, there'll be stuff everywhere, there's courses. Learn real body language. I learned a lot of my real things where I can turn into whatever I need to, mostly not in wrestling. Watching the rest, we've talked about this before, but I watched the world, but also working in nightclubs when I was a teenager and doing security and stuff. And you've got to read crowds very quickly, or you learn to know that when people are, this is the common wrestler thing, is when people rub their hands together and they go, I'm going to do this to you. I know you're not going to do anything to me in real life,
Right.
because you're already nervous. If you touch your hands, or that is a sign of it's apprehension, it's nerves. You're not going to do anything, and that's what people do. I learned to do to slowly, and again, I don't want to say watch me, but if you watch any of my early WCW stuff, you're going to see me trying to figure out how to get my character across on TV. And one of the tricks, because I knew that this rubbing your hands together thing, or doing too much with your hands, is, unless it's the right thing at the right time, I knew that I had to make sure I didn't do that. And it's really awkward to know what to do with your hands. Well, with my character as Lord Stephen, and I just copied a lot of things, but one of the things that British nobility do, they always put one hand behind the back. So it got rid of one hand. So then the other hand can be gesturing, but it's not doing things when I'm rubbing them together. And it's little tricks like that you pick up over time. Well, you're seeing me now as myself, if you're watching this or listening to me, and I'm not the most comfortable doing that. I'm a bit awkward about that. As soon as I have to be whatever I am, and I think we've talked about this before, William Regal or whatever I'm playing, Lord Stephen Regal, stays at Atlanta Airport. And for me to get to the arena in Atlanta or any place that I used to wrestle in Atlanta, I used to have to go past the airport. When I leave that airport, then it's Darren. And Darren isn't that whatever I have to be. I leave it there. Now, if I'm in a situation where there's any people there and I know I can read a room and I just carry myself, that's one thing. But when I'm just sat talking to somebody or having a conversation, I'm very quiet and I listen most of the time. I have a lot of things that we'll end up discussing. Things will come up, but you'll notice this is very, very, I'm, sometimes mumble a bit and I stumble a bit over my words. Some of that's down to my lip not having full usage of my lip because there's nerve damage in it. Other times it's just me not having the greatest of vocabulary because I'm not overeducated. And I've managed to get through this entire time, people thinking I'm all kinds of educated. I'm educated in many, many things, but not as book smart as a lot of people would think I was. Or think I am, and I managed to get through that. So yes, it is a little awkward.
I think the fascinating thing about you, and you remind me of a great teacher in my life. I have a great music teacher who has a lot of credibility the way you do, and he comes alive when he teaches. He
Yes.
gets really excited. He starts talking. I'm kind of the same way too, where when you're teaching, that seems like your comfort zone, and we're going to talk a lot about your teaching today because we're going to talk about the first NXT Takeover. Now, not to be confused with Takeover Arrival. This is Takeover 1. Me and Mr. Regal were a little confused this week looking over it.
Yes.
I actually watched Arrival as well, which was fantastic. But with Takeover 1, which of course took place in 2014 in May, it was, I believe, the second live broadcast using the WWE Network. As a trainer, as a scout, as your position in NXT, when did you start kind of hearing that you're going to be doing these live events for this developmental program that you had?
This is where you're going to have to help me. My time in NXT was incredible, and I'm having the same kind of thing now with being in AEW. There's only one problem with both of those times of my life. They're both incredible, but the time is going by so quickly, and the time went by in WWE so quickly. 21 years there, and then what was it? Was it 10 years or more with WWE in the starting off in FCW and then NXT and so forth and so forth. So much went on so quickly in so few years. And again, I think people take it for granted. But if you go back and look what we all accomplished there in the short period of time that was from the first takeover, we ended up being 36 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right, 36 of them. And every one of them was well received, more than well received. And they hold up. And watching the original takeovers, it holds up. Right. So they're all going to hold up. And I know that they'll hold the test of time.
And the interesting thing about Takeover 1 and the early takeovers, they don't just hold up. They're kind of these historical things. When you see Charlotte, Charlotte Flair, just this newbie to the business who bears very little resemblance to the Charlotte we have now, style-wise, except for the talent that you saw.
Incredible talent, yes.
We're seeing this a lot of legendary things go on, history going on.
Unbelievable. Just watching it last night, I watched it again last night, so I had it fresh on my mind. And it's like the opening match, and you're watching the people that came out
The
on the
Rosebuds.
opening match, the Rosebuds.
Yeah,
And
you saw Braun Strowman too, huh?
and you're seeing Braun Strowman and you're seeing Becky Lynch.
Yes, sir.
And I saw, you know, I believe he's part of this podcast family now, Ryan Katz. And it's Becky Lynch wasn't even on the roster, you know, like she was just getting a foot in the door there. But she seems like she's been around forever. But how long ago was it? What year was that? I didn't make a note of the year.
It was 2014. It was
2014. So it's
over
only
8 years ago.
Only 8, but it's only 8 years ago.
It's true.
And in 8 years, we did 36 takeovers, and they finished last year. And that's it. And then in between these takeovers, there was the Cruiserweight Classic. There was 2 Mae Youngs. There was all these the UK stuff and the it's mind numbing.
That's
when you
interesting
look,
point you make. We don't think about how consolidated all that stuff was. Someone,
yes,
you know, I would say my son and my run as wrestling fans took place during the NXT, you know, revival. And
Okay,
so
and-
we were there at all the Brooklyns. We were there in Dallas. We were at San Jose. But when you think about this magic, I'm going to say magical time of NXT,
and it was a magical time.
Man, you
was,
guys did do a lot. I can imagine you can't remember the specific
and
events
it's not
because so much went on.
once we start talking about it. The thing that obviously that's all going to come back, but I just cannot get my head around that was 8 years ago, because there was so much happened. It's gone so quickly, and you think about it. The last takeover was last year.
Yeah, last year I believe.
Yeah. So really, it was only 7 years, and from 2020, we were in COVID. So you've actually got what 5.5, 6 years where all this incredible stuff took place. 5.5 years, and it went like that for me. It just went so quickly. I'm always telling people to make the most of every opportunity in this and that, in this job and in life, believe me, because it goes so quickly. But I wished I'd have really paid more attention, and I was paying as much attention as possible because I was involved in everything. But because you're involved in everything, there's still things that you're not actually sometimes taking a step back and going, wow, what? And I'm going to sound a bit silly now, but I used to do that all the time. I used to go, wow, how have we got here so quickly? How is this happening? How is that happening? How have we managed to do that? And then it's all over and it's gone. So another lesson today: make the most of every second you've got on this earth. Because
I'm sorry, go ahead.
You know, please. It's just that thing of it's gone by so quickly, and there was so much went on. And look at this. We talked about that Becky Lynch was one of the Rosebuds, and look what Becky's gone on to do. Right, Becky Lynch has become a superstar. Right, look at the main event. Right, the main event in that show was Pac, as he is known now, Adrian Neville against TJ Wilson, Tyson Kidd. Tyson, unfortunately, is no longer in wrestling and seems to be, unfortunately, out of it for a lot longer than he should have ever, because he was and is as good as anybody, right? That was a main event that will stand up forever for the test of time. Adrian Neville has not worked there in the WWE for the last 3 or more years, right? But it was a real strange thing for me to watch. But so many feelings I'm getting that I've had this. I was so fortunate to be a part of all of that and to be a part of everything that was going on at the time. But it's moved on so quickly, and now we're going back and looking at this like it's a nostalgic thing.
Crazy, huh?
But it's 8 years ago. It's not 30 years ago, which is going to be another different thing with this show. All these takeovers, if we do the 36 over the next whatever amount of time, we're going to look back at them as nostalgic because They do stand. They will stand the test of time forever.
I know
And-
we certainly, my son and I certainly think of these NXT takeovers as nostalgic. Like
Right.
it's remember that. Remember what a good time it was. Because I mean, you were there, you know how
Yes.
busy you were, but man, it was like nothing I'd ever seen in professional wrestling before as a 30-year fan.
Right. Well, that's for people to make their own minds up, but I was there and I thought it was the best time of my career. And I was not, you know, I think if I remember rightly, not long after that, I had my first neck surgery. And then I became the GM, if I'm remembering correctly, because I was still doing commentary. Well, after my first neck surgery was when I was made GM. I came back after the neck surgery, and that's when I got, and I was GM for what, 7 years, suppose, I think so. So I was still doing commentary. That was weird as well, seeing me doing commentary and listening to my old, absolutely wanting to cringe sometimes at some of the nonsense that comes out of me when I'm just being William Regal. And anyway, let's start from top to bottom, because I enjoyed the show immensely. But if you're gonna, things will jog my memory, but it's gone so quickly, and so much gone on, and everybody that's on that, good or bad, as far as people that were on that card, they've had a whole life, and their lives have gone in different directions, and some not good and some incredibly well. And like Becky's somebody who means a lot to me, because I was there on her tryout. There's a bit of a, whether people know this or not, I can tell you, this is definitely a fact. In the last, whatever time that I was a scout for WWE, things started to change. There was the wrestlers who I took care of, and then as far as athletes, whereas 15, 20 years ago, a lot of athletes, if they were amateur wrestlers or whatever they were, would, and probably before that, but there was still, like, if you go back and watch in 2000, there was the group of, an incredible group that turned up. And that's, there's stories out there that people just, because they just look and they don't actually know what kind of a incredible thing happened, just organically happened at the right time. There is the early 2000s OVW team of Randy Orton, John Cena, Shelton Benjamin, Dave Bautista, all coming out of obviously Brock, you know, all coming out of that group, but they all just happened to turn up at the right time. In this job, very rarely do you get a group of people that all are so talented turn up at one time ever. That was that was just unbelievable, the amount of talent that turned up there. And I know there's the people that probably that were there that go, yes, because we know how to do everything right. Well, once that team left, I don't remember another team coming out of there of that standard.
That's true.
Right?
Right.
You get the right people turn up at the right time, and everything works out. And it did. Everything worked out. It's like, if there was, back in time a little bit, if you got one huge or one top person in wrestling turn up every so many years, you were doing good. And one small, and it was a lot. Again, if you look, it's the biggest time ever in wrestling. You got Steve Austin, The Rock, The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, Triple H, Mankind, everybody in a few years. You could have actually done with them, one of them just coming along every
right.
3 or 4 years, right? Because
Right.
that would have carried everything, keep going for. But it doesn't happen like that. Sometimes things happen. Well, in my time as a talent scout, there was a lot of things that went on as far as the wrestlers and the wrestling, the independent wrestlers that were out there. They had to find their own world, right? And they did what they did, and they became what they became. And NXT mirrored a lot of that. And they were finding ways to, whatever was left in the world, the wrestlers were going there. Well, then the athletes. Well, in my time as a scout there, a lot of the bigger, stronger people that came along weren't really that, there wasn't that many that wanted to do this. As far as, I know Jerry Briscoe did an incredible job of nurturing the amateur wrestlers. And then there were other people that were looking for football players or whatever. But there was a majority of the younger generation all tried or went to go to MMA instead, because that was an outlet then. Now, you can take this, and this might be some people will have their own ideas about this. I know, because I was seeing who was coming. Not the rest. The wrestlers were the wrestlers that you saw. As far as athletes, there wasn't that many big, strong, or the kind of people that WWE like coming our way. A lot of them were going to try to be in MMA. And I've had many conversations with people or know a lot of things about a lot of people that I can't really say, but they wanted it. Would you rather be a world champion of something real, or would you rather be the world champion of entertainment business? So, and then by the time that they'd gone through finding out whether MMA worked for them, some of them were coming our way and they couldn't get through it. And when I say get through it, there's me and a couple of other people know what was happening, either legal things or medical things. We couldn't hire them. That's why I was very happy. It's been well over, it was about 18 months ago, when in one group and in COVID, in one group, the Creed brothers and Bron Breakker turned up, and then a couple of other fellas as well. And I'm thinking, where have these been for the last 10, 15 years? People, not only people who look like that, but want to be professional wrestlers. We were getting a lot of athletes, and trying to think of his real name, but Madcap Moss. He was an incredible, and he always was. He just had a lot of setbacks with different things. I'm so glad he's getting now to people see how good he was. But he was one of the few of the bigger fellas that fit all the boxes, but wanted to be he might not have been wanted to be when he was young, I don't know. But when he got into it, he did everything he could to be a wrestler. There was just not a huge amount of the people that came that really wanted to be wrestlers. And so it depends on how much effort they put in, right? It's when you get a couple of people like Bronson Rechsteiner and the Creed brothers, and they want to be wrestlers, and they do nothing but study this or have backgrounds in it, and that's they're huge fans. That's why it works, right? John Cena, when I first met him, was a bodybuilder, but he was a wrestling fan. And that's why he became, in my opinion, and I've been around them all, there's nobody can say a bad word about John Cena to me, because I've been lucky to ride off the coattails of a huge amount of people, right? I've rode on the coattails of all the top people in WCW, but the pay thing was a lot different in WWE. I got paid off the gates. And I was around Steve Austin. I was lucky enough to be on shows with Steve Austin and The Rock and The Undertaker and all these, Shawn Michaels and Triple H and Stone Cold Steve Austin and all these incredible people, right? But there's nobody has made me as much money because of the time period that I was wrestling in the WWE as John Cena, because of longevity. Because again, a lot of those fellas came and they were huge, incredible, massive stars for a few years, for 3 or 4 years. And they're still huge, massive stars, but they all went in different directions. John stayed the course, and he stayed the course, and I was on every show with him, nearly every show. Luckily, wherever he moved to, I just looked out that I was a lot of the time on shows with him, and he was making, my family more money because I was getting over the longer period of time. Does that make sense?
Sure,
There's
yeah.
people made me more like Steve. I got to be on shows selling out with Steve Austin. Got to be on shows staying out with Rock. But it was for the last couple of years that they were around. I think it was a 10-year or something run or more with John Cena. So, but John Cena wanted to be around. Well, there was a lot of people in the last 10 years or so that were big people as far as what WWE like, who just either didn't really care that much or we couldn't hire them for whatever reason.
Right.
And so that was a thing that I don't know. I can understand why Mr. McMahon wanted to change things, because he doesn't care about how people get there. He just wants the finished product.
Right.
And the people at NXT take the rap for that sometimes. And it is our jobs, not mine anymore, but it was our jobs to create new superstars. Well, you get what you're getting, and that is the occasional athlete that hasn't decided, that wants to be a wrestler, and it takes time to pay off, or the wrestlers that are already out there. And it was just the way it was in the last 10 years or so. So getting back to what NXT was, NXT at the time, we were trying to find the new group, and we were always trying to find the new group of next John Cena, the next Rock. Well, they don't come along very often.
No, they're generational talents.
Generational talents that have only come along in history. There was a group of them came along at the end of the 90s that all came along together, but they don't come along very often. John Cena was, a different kettle of fish, but he was an athlete who loved pro wrestling. Well, you don't get those very often. A lot of people were going to MMA, and then it was whatever reason, and different things were going on. I know this is where you need to keep me on track, but there's so much of this misinformation out there of why things turn out the way they turned out. The wrestling people were the people, and we were hiring a lot of them, that were the ones who were going out and hustling and getting good at wrestling. But there wasn't that many of them that were that big or had the personalities or had and so it's people will tell their own stories and whatever. We did the best we could possibly do with NXT, and if you don't know what was going on, and a lot of times I can't tell you, and I won't tell you, and if I do, it's time for me to go, because I will never ever. I'm a man of my word, and there's going to be a lot of things I can't say on this podcast as to why certain things didn't work out or whatever. So anybody listening has never got to worry about me telling anything bad about anybody. Yeah. It's not going to happen, right?
Well, that's something I think we all like about this podcast,
right? And if it does, it's time for me to go. And I'm saying this, and this is, don't let this get took out of context. If I start doing that, that I've lost the plot.
Right.
Because you can, and anybody where I'm working now, I work at AEW, anybody there, that's, I'm not just saying this out loud. The people who know me know if you tell me something, that's it. It stays with me. Or I have to tell you, when I was in my old job, look, you've told me this. Before you tell me, if you're going to tell me what I think you're going to tell me, I cannot not tell my boss about this. But if I'm giving you my word that you like, we have conversations, I'm giving you my word it will go nowhere. I have to be the keeper of a lot of people's problems and secrets and whatever else. Or I'll get you whatever you need and help and whatever else. That's what I did. So what we're seeing now, as far as NXT Takeover, the first one, is the group of people that we had at the time.
One thing about NXT, I think that drew us all in, and something I believe AEW has really kind of captured as well, is that crowd. NXT Full Sail crowd had this ability, because it was small, to be intimate, but also had this ability to really push people and get them over, as they say. It was
Yes.
a very unique, the best way I could describe it, it was like a PG ECW crowd. Like everybody is in on everything. Um, they're cheering the good guys, they're booing the bad guys. They're really helping everybody. It's a very unusual crowd at that time, wasn't it?
It was, and the one thing that it was a great crowd. Crowd made everything. The whole of NXT was made by the crowd. Whether it was the people who were kind enough to turn up for the tapings at Full Sail, to the events such as Takeover, Rival Takeover, they made everything. But also, there weren't how can I put this? This crowd weren't just being polite and cheering. They would.
Yeah.
You had to earn their trust. The audience weren't just. It wasn't just, oh, we're NXT. We're gonna just cheer because we like the people here. You had to give them the talent. Had to give them the goods, and then they reacted. So the audience were a great audience that built up, but it was also the talent they weren't doing it just out of sympathy,
Right.
reacting that way. They were because they were seeing incredible people evolve in front of them, and they saw them from the beginning a lot of the time, but they took to who they took to, and some people they didn't, and then but you had to earn your keep with that crowd, and if you weren't, you kept you keep with that crowd. They stayed with you, and they were a fantastic audience. Yeah.
Well, we definitely saw some examples of that. The first match was Adam Rose pinned Camacho in 5 minutes and 8 seconds. Um, Adam Rose was somebody, it's something we'll probably talk about a couple times this episode, where you guys, or I guess you weren't in creative, but the people in creative were trying on different things for different people. Adam Rose,
Yes.
I thought, was fantastic as Leo Kruger. Somebody made a decision. Leo Kruger's not the way we want to go. We want to go with this um, Russell Brand type character in Adam Rose. Did your job change at all as a trainer when you're training someone
Right.
who does a shift, like say to Adam Rose or the Ascension, who were created to become world beaters, or Tyler Breeze, who becomes Tyler Breeze? How does your job as a trainer change when their
So
character changes?
I need to clear this up straight away. I was never a trainer at NXT. I used to jump in on training sessions, and from the very beginning, Triple H said to me, he knows me, and I'm going to help anybody, right? But he said, you have a lot of duties and a lot of things that you've got to take care of. Let people earn their spot before you start helping them. I didn't. I'm going to have to admit this, H. I'm sorry, but I did used to help everybody, but I did try to keep to that. So there was a whole incredible crew of people that were all involved in that, and trainers, and they all know who they are, and Dusty and everybody involved. That the Leo Kruger thing worked for a while. There was the change, and I was always having, I had a good relationship with Adam Rose as far as working relationship. I didn't know him outside of this. I didn't know anybody outside of this. Again, when I come home, I leave all that there. But we used to chat a lot. When he started doing that, I remember him trying that. I was at certain promo classes that he started to do that and going, wow, that's brave, and that's going to either work or it's not. And he made it work. And just watching the sheer joy that brought to everybody involved was a great thing, and it caught on. So at the time, if he'd have asked me anything, I would have, and we did have chats, because there was people knew if they wanted to do, whether it had all kinds of things that I can help with, if it's wrestling or serious wrestling or learning how to be a good villain, but they also, I'm the person they can definitely go to and say, I'm thinking of doing some kind of entertaining thing. Well, I never shied away from that, right? And I just give it a go, and let go on your instincts. And so I know we had conversations. I can't remember exactly what, but it was conversations about how to just go out there and give it your best. And there would have been little things, and maybe, what, obviously asking him what's your idea, maybe try this, maybe try that. But there's not just me doing that, there's everybody there's doing that. So I can't take anything that happened there, with the exception if I say that it was a scouting thing or putting together certain tournaments. Everybody there was helping with everything. So the whole crew of the NXT staff were all there helping in one way or another. You would have to ask each individual talent what they got out of us. For me to sit here and claim that I did anything, I might have said something that might have changed the way he did things, but I might not have done as well. I could sit here, there'd be a lot of, is where this starts getting a bit wonky, isn't it? Because you get a lot of these old wrestlers in the, oh, I did this for him and I did that. And I don't think I did anything for anybody. They ask me and I talk, and whether they take it on board or not, if they say later on, oh, Darren or William Regal helped me, then that's the first I know about it, because there are certain things that I know I help people with. When it comes to character stuff, yeah, people come to me and I'll sit and bore them to death all day long about character stuff, or I won't bore them and they'll sit and listen and take it on board. But then you've got other people involved as well, right? You've got all kinds of incredible minds sort of helping along. So if you're asking me that, unless I know it's a definite thing that I did for somebody, I can't take any credit for it. But we all helped, and we all nurtured him to do that character. And I can't remember anybody that was against him doing that.
Well, it was,
and I wouldn't say I wouldn't say the name, but I would say there was people that were not interested in him doing that. I think I remember everybody was, yeah, we're all on board. You go out and do your thing. And so it ended up being, it was a short. It wasn't probably for him, if you ask him, and that was a big part of his life. When I'm looking at it, that had a short run, and it was great. And there's a lot of things in NXT that were, because we such a short period of time. It's a few years, but if you ask them, that's a big chunk of their life. To me, it's just somebody it's another person who was in my life for a few years and then wasn't, and then never had any contact since. So
with Adam Rose, he was Leo Kruger, then he's Adam Rose.
yeah,
We've seen footage of you kind of giving input to people and, really giving them good advice, especially in the promo and the character department, in some circumstances. Did you have a preference personally? Did you think one was not, more capable of drawing money or whatever, but did you think one was more genuine to him, that he pulled off better than the other?
I thought he did both very well. But the Adam Rose character was the one that got people excited the most.
Absolutely.
If you ask him, he may have been far happier doing the more serious. It's depending what you are as a person, what your goals are in this job. He might have, I don't know, because I haven't asked him. I haven't seen or spoken to him ever since he left NXT. So he might have. Everybody sets out with a thing, right? Let me keep me on track here. And it starts off with this match with Adam Rose. Adam Rose, whatever he started out to be, because he was obviously a wrestler from South Africa, he might have probably wanted to be a tough guy. But what I didn't know about him was he had a sense of humor and he didn't take himself too seriously, which you'll find is a trait with a lot of us British people or people from different countries. Sometimes if you certainly went my age group, and I know he's older, you either laughed and got through it and didn't take yourself too seriously, or you didn't get through it, because we grew up in different circumstances and whatever else. So, and you find that in America, in people that are working class people, they laugh at a lot more, and they're not. Well, I know he wasn't born into a wealthy family. You've just got to sort of not take yourself too seriously to get through life. So he would have been somebody who obviously it wouldn't have worked. That's another thing. When you've heard me say these things of just make anything work. That Adam Rose character wouldn't have worked if he hadn't have given it everything he had. And I remember seeing him doing some of these things before he became Adam Rose and going, oh, he's happy doing this. But you'd have to ask him whether he would have rather been some kind of a tough guy, because a lot of people in this job want to be tough guys, and they act like tough guys, and you ask them to do anything that isn't where they're acting like a tough guy, and they won't do it, and they can't do it because they're always acting like a tough guy. I don't feel the need to do that. That's why it worked for me. I pretty much can see that the way he did his thing, that he didn't care about it either. But I'm sure he might wanted to have been Leo Kruger and been a mercenary South African or whatever he was playing at the time. I know that was a long question, but there's a lot of things that go into this.
Absolutely.
These things are things that people, you hear all these stories, or you hear. That's why I stay out of that world so much, because it comes back to me anyway, and I'm going, if people only had a real clue what goes on, you're right. There's not that many people of the people that we got to NXT were the people that could get through the legal system, the medical system, and the ones, as far as wrestlers, who had gone out there and hustled and done whatever they had to do to get a name for themselves in whatever country they came from. So, because that'll lead on to, there's other people on this show that they've done that.
Let's talk about Camacho. Of course,
Right,
Camacho has gone on since
since
NXT
then, right.
to New Japan Pro Wrestling as a huge part of one of the biggest boom periods of the last few years of the Bullet Club. And he's done extremely well for himself and has quite the pedigree as well.
Exactly. pedigree is one thing, but the whole family, absolute credit to this industry. And Donny, as I still call him when I do see him, incredible pro. Just watching him, watching the quality of their wrestling last night, and watching the little things that I see that a lot of people maybe don't, but really exceptionally good pro, and a lovely, lovely lad. And he was somebody who everybody at NXT listened to, a lot of the younger people, because he carries this, and it's not, you know, there's a lot of these stories and about Tonga, his father, Meng. He's a gentleman who carries himself like a pro, and that's what he is. And his sons are all the same, absolute gentlemen and pros. It's not about anybody. You should have every right to fear them as far as the way they are, but you don't. They have admiration, from the word respect and admiration, from their colleagues because of the way they carry themselves, not because they go around acting like tough guys. They are incredible humans. And watching him last night, he was one of the people that I really, I don't know what I wished I could tell you, or I might say I wouldn't tell you, but I don't know why things didn't work out for him, because he's about as everything that you could want. Looks the part, wrestles the part, is the part, perfect pro in every way. Just the last night watching his pins. I mean, I'm a bit of a pin freak. I like my pins to look good. I believe pins are the foundation of what we do. We are portraying trained professional fighters with instinct. You know that you can beat somebody with a pin, and his pins were all spot on. He was covering both shoulders. I'm not going to get too much into this because things aren't as they used to be, but you can tell from the way his family has a history in the wrestling business of the way he just pins people. He pins people because that is, if you're a pro, why wouldn't you make sure there's weight on both shoulders of your opponent?
If you're trying to win, right?
You're trying to win, yes.
Unless it's absolute,
unless it's absolute, you've knocked them out, and then they're not going to get up. Then you don't have to worry about your pin so much, or it's a desperation, a long time into a match when you can just drape an arm over someone. It's just desperation. But otherwise, your pins should be everything covered. There should be, and reasons. You don't just hook a leg and bring it to somebody's stomach. The reason you hook a leg is to drag their hip off the floor, which stacks their body weight on their shoulders. And I'm a bit of a pin freak. And one thing I will say, and people can laugh or not, and I don't care, because I think I've earned my right to say this. More people should take notice of the pins, because I hear silly people, and I don't want to say silly, but just because nobody pulls them up over this stuff. I hear Jim Ross, sometimes call out people on the pins, and I will do. If you look back on a lot of my commentary, and we'll hear, if you listen to any of the early NXT stuff, if I'm not seeing a correct pin, instead of I'm going to say why. And Jim on AEW now will say why. And talent shouldn't get offended at that they think that he's burying them. They should look at that and go, perhaps I should tighten my pins up a little bit, because he can't kill his credibility as an announcer, and I wouldn't as much as an announcer, by calling something, look at it, a great pin, when there's nothing covering either shoulder when you're trying to pin somebody. I'm not going to go too deep into this because it is a thing with me that I know that a fight scene in a movie is what actually happens is the stuntman misses by about 6 inches when he hits somebody. But if you saw that on the fight scene in a movie, you wouldn't watch it. And you not doing proper pins on people, that's basically treating your audience with disrespect, in my opinion. So I'm going to leave that and let people create all kinds of fuss about that I'm betting. I'm not. It's because it's nobody's fault. It's just that I come from a time where all the wrestlers that I wrestled in a day when we had to keep, it was a saying in Britain, keeping the strength of the business, keeping the strength of the job. And you can watch even the worst of old British wrestling that you can find from the World of Sport era. You will never see a bad pin. You will never see somebody not have something on a shoulder somewhere. And if there was, and when I was wrestling as a teenager, if I didn't have something, even if it was just a finger on the person's arm, the people I was wrestling would just lift their arm up instantly. They were, unless I had either their body weight stacked on them or my knee across the shoulder. Or a recent thing that I saw the other night on AEW, young David Finlay, who obviously I'd known. In fact, we used to babysit him. My wife used to babysit him. It was weird. I still find it weird when I see him. There's a pin that he does on there where he's got his knee on one shoulder, he's got his full body weight on. It's called a full body press, and it was like, don't have to tell him about his pins. I used to tell a lot of people in NXT after everybody had told them how great the matches were. I say, right, can I have a word with you? And look, your pins weren't so good. And they went, oh yeah, you've taught me. And it's just because nobody's drilled it into them. And I don't expect everybody to change this because I don't know if it's too far gone now. But I believe we should give our audience the best thing possible. And also the announcers the best product so they can put you over. And if you're not putting everything into your pin and you're just lying across their belly and there's nothing on either shoulder, unless they're knocked out or completely, you're both exhausted at the end of a very long match, why wouldn't you, as portraying a trained professional fighter with instinct, instantly lift your shoulder off the floor, knowing that if the referee counts it, you would not make as much money because you've lost.
Right.
That
certainly makes sense.
Right. So I've got that out the way because I am a bit of a pin freak. But everybody in this day and age could definitely take lessons on how to pin people and because you'll find if you always pin somebody like your life depends on it, because it does. If you think about it, if you in reality and you kick out like your life depends on it, it will never look bad. Right. And that's as much as I'm going to, because again, I don't like giving away my tricks and I don't like ruining things for people, but it's just something that young wrestlers should learn how to do. Right. There's people up legs and they're not hooking the leg. They bring the knee to the chest. That's not doing anything to stop those shoulders getting off the floor. You need to stack the rip up. If you're covering the body, you need to have some weight on both shoulders. You need to have an arm on the other shoulder. You need to have a forearm. You need to have a knee arm covering the arm closest to you, or your body weight, or and a lot of people do that thing. And I was the one that popularized it in America. Everybody does it now, but it was stuff that nearly all European wrestlers did. The bar across the face, but if you watch, everything else is pinned. There's an hand on the far shoulder. There's a knee covering their arm on the shoulder closest to me. And not just me, I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about any of the older. It's just, that's the way it is. Unless you are knocked out, then it's a different thing. So that's my little thing on that. But Donnie, Camacho in this, all his pins are top rate. So I'm going off on these tangents because I want to try and, it's hard for me to talk open shop about a lot of things, but I want it without going. What I can do, I'm not the greatest of illusionists. If you equate this to magic, there's two types of magicians. There's people who do big illusions, and then there's close-up card magic. Well, I'm better at close-up card magic. If you can do it all, if you can do it all, then you're great, right? You've got it all. But one of the fundamental things of our job is pins, and so if nothing else, get that right. You can do what, and it's got nothing to do with what style you do. I'm not knocking in. I love all styles of wrestling as long as there's effort. But there's no style of wrestling that can't be bettered by having better pins, right? There's Absolutely. A point. There's actually a point in this one of these matches, and I've made a note of it somewhere, where somebody does what I call a double leg Nelson. When people do a sunset flip, the actual pin where their shoulders are out, and you should put your feet over their shoulders to keep the shoulders down. At one point in this in Takeover, there's 1 foot off, and I actually call it out. I say if that person would have had their foot on the shoulder, it would have been harder for their opponent to kick out. Well, the actual pin part of it is nobody knows that here, but it's a double leg Nelson. A Nelson is anything where you're involving the shoulders. So two feet on the shoulders. I see a lot of people doing it with the feet out here, nothing on the shoulders. Now, if they've been smashed into the ground, maybe they can't lift the shoulders up. But if it's not, maybe you need to get your feet on the shoulders. And why I'm saying this is because I know there are a lot of old wrestlers out there that want to knock all the young wrestlers. I don't. I want to help you all. I wished I could just go here. Have everything that's in my brain, because there's so much of it. Don't give these old wrestlers who want to moan about anything any ammunition to moan about. Just make your tricks better. If you made your tricks better, maybe they wouldn't moan so much. You might not care, or you might laugh at them. But there's a lot to be learned from older wrestlers, because older wrestlers from the 80s and before that had to go back to the same place every week or every month, most of them weekly, whether it be in territories or when I was in Britain, it was most shows were either every fortnight, every 2 weeks, or every month through the actual show. So people get to see you all the time. Well, people get to see you all the time now on TV. They get to see your stuff every week. So you might be as hot as you can be, but after a while, somebody will come along who maybe is the person who does better pins than everybody else. And people start noticing it. And then all of a sudden, your stock starts coming down. Shouldn't you be trying to up your game a little bit? And by upping your game, you'll just keep more people's attention on you. And it's all the stuff that I can help you with is not something you're ever going to get any praise for. That's the problem with reading people's opinions of yourself, because again, you don't hear about close-up magicians, do you? You hear about illusionists. It's people, David Blaine, and people who do the big things that get all the praise, right? You don't hear about the incredible close-up magician. We shouldn't really notice, in a magician sense you should, but in wrestling you shouldn't notice the in-between stuff that just looks better. You shouldn't see the little things but it builds it. When you do the big things at the end of that, it will make that big thing mean more. Okay, I will leave my last little magic thing. This will be a very niche thing for people, but we really are in the same business. We can be illusionists, or we can be close-up card magicians, or close-up magic people, or we can be the same thing. We've got to entertain our audience, and we should be giving our audience the best possible. You know, if it's a big illusion, I don't want to see the wires at the back. I don't want to, if it's close-up magic, if you have to see, you know, if you see the slightest bit and it's really on top of you. Well, you think about it, cameras are on you all the time, and they can see through things that don't look right. And your announcers then can't talk about, if it doesn't look right, they're not going to talk about that not looking right. They're going to talk about something else, right? So there's illusions and there's close-up card magic. Again, the close-up card magic, or the close-up detail of your wrestling, nobody's going to talk about. Years ago, I would imagine even the younger audience, if they're listening to this 54-year-old man go on about pins now. Years ago, there was two equally famous magicians. One of them was called Harry Houdini, who I think even the younger people will know his name. And then the other one was called Harry Blackstone. And there's only the magicians or people who studied that know about Harry Blackstone, but he was equally as famous, but he was mostly a close-up magician. Houdini did these big stunts. Well, Harry Blackstone used to say of Houdini couldn't put his hands in the middle of Central Park without rustling the leaves. Okay? I'll let you take out what you want to take from that. I was always taught, and kept my wrestling was kept honest by the people that I wrestled when I was younger, that they wouldn't let me do things that didn't look right. I had to learn how to do everything looking right. But I do know, and you hopefully by now you've known that I really don't, it's not an ego thing for me. I do know you can watch stuff of mine from when I came to WCW, and it still holds up, and you still can't see through those tricks. And that was me at 24 and 25.
Absolutely.
Right? You won't see a bad pin. You won't see any pin where, and if it is somebody, if I couldn't get the pin on right, this bothers me to have to say that I think so. I do like, but I would say, kick out instantly. Don't lie there while this pin's not on right. I would tell, but I don't want to see anybody to see me not putting a good pin on. Again, you're not going to get any praise for that. You just, because it's the illusions, right? Another last little thing about, and you can take all these things how you want to take. I'm just trying to give you lessons without exposing our business. It was about 15 years ago, there was a documentary came on, not a documentary, a show. They still show it on cable TV, The Masked Magician, and he exposed all the tricks of all the Vegas illusionists, right?
Sure.
And it put a lot of them out of business because they were multi-million-dollar effects. These illusions cost a lot of money. It put a lot of those fellas out that were doing that, and people in that industry out of business. Penn and Teller just reinvented the trick. You take what you want to take out of that.
Absolutely.
That's what wrestling is. If whatever you're doing now, and I don't care how big of a star you are, whatever you're doing now, you've got to keep up, because there's going to be somebody coming along. You need to keep working on your craft and reinventing the trick, or reinventing something about it. Well, that's why I just want to first of all, give Camacho his props, because he did an excellent, it looked like, there's another thing that looked like two grown men having a wrestling contest. That was another thing that stands out. They both look like fighters, even though Adam Rose did the character. When it was time to go, that's that. We started off this talking about body language and different things. They all had to be what you are. And Camacho, great with because of just me seeing how good his pins were. Hopefully that's taught some people some lessons. So let's move on, because this is what happens when you start on one thing. I go off into all these tangents, and I'm trying to educate everybody.
I think that's definitely one of the things that people love about the show, and something we've got the most comments on is people do love learning about this. And I saw promoter with Black Label Pro, Mikey, who tweeted, "Hey man, if you're a young wrestler, you need to listen to this show." And it's because of advice like that from you. And moving on, as you say, to the second match is the Ascension. Victor and Connor take on Kalisto and El Local, otherwise known as Ricardo Rodriguez, repackaged a little bit. And Victor and Connor were kind of packaged to be like the Road Warriors in Kansas City in '83. Like they were just the most dominant tag team. You know, they would just every week would win. They had the presentation. What was your experiences working with the Ascension, and what did you think of the act?
Both of them were good lads, and they made that work, and it worked for the audience, and it worked. And they were big time things for us at NXT, and they went out there and did what they did, and it worked, and they were always working on the game and did everything right and possible. The Ascension did a great business for us there, and we're over with the audience, and whatever happened when they went up to the main roster, that's their story, not mine, because I wasn't there then. But I've spent a lot of time with both of them, talking, you know, again, back to that, what we said before, I was just always, if they wanted me to show them something, I'd show them something, we'd chat. A lot of what I do with people is put, once you're a wrestler and you've got, I know you've got pretty much most things down, the best thing I can do to you, or do for you, is one, work on your detail, and two, is give you a mindset. I can put people, I sort of, let's focus on this. Let's get into this mindset. Let's get into, because then if you get into the right mindset, and everybody's different, but assess the situation, see the character that you've got, let's get this right mindset going, and then you'll find that the moves that you do will follow suit to the mindset. And I can't say what they are, because every single character and person is different. Right. But because I've seen so much, and whether it's not my stuff, I've seen so many people from so many countries and what worked for them, and sometimes getting into conversations with them, and usually I have a thing where I just go and sit down and ask them, you know, especially all the years when I was younger, traveling, once people would actually speak to me when I was like 18, you know, there's some would and some wouldn't. Once they realized I wasn't going anywhere, yeah, I'd go up and ask, you know, all the rest, you know, is there anything you can help me with? And they all had different ways that either show you things or they put you into mindsets. Kalisto, I loved him, thought the world of him. Ricardo, always, I used to have Ricardo with me when I was first doing this, the job that I used to do. I worked with the extras at TV's Raw and SmackDown, and he was working with ADR, and I used to have him come and ask him to be with me, and sometimes wrestle some of the extras, because there was odd numbers, or sometimes he was always around me at that time, and you know, he knew what he was. I know he's gone on to traveling around, being a trainer in different countries and for different wrestling schools, and good lad. And Kalisto, man, he was fantastic.
Pretty incredible talent, right?
Incredible talent. One of the guys that I highly rated that was around at the time, and then we got him through to a tryout, and he got hired, and across the board, sometimes, you know, there's always going to be, I liked him, and you know, there's the comparisons, and it's an unfair comparison when people see, I never compare anybody to anybody.
The Ray comparison,
the Ray sort of connect. I always like that. There was not a person that had any part of the tryout didn't say yes to him. There's going to be a lot of people that I'm not going to say it, but there's times with certain people, and there's one on this show that I had to pull my, didn't matter what other people said, I had to go to Triple H and go, no, I believe in this person. I believe that they can, and that's about as much as I'm going to say on that. I did not have to do that with Manny. Everybody saw what they saw when he did a tryout, and I was just happy for him because he was another lovely lad and great at what he did. The greatest thing that happened to me was at 18, wrestling the person who I based my style on and was one of my heroes, Pete Roberts, at 18, wrestling him, and I sat down afterward. He made me look 1,000 times better than I should have done. He was the pros pro of all pros in Europe and in Japan. People hold him in high regard in Japan, the older wrestlers there, the Kidos and the Fujinamis and the people like that, and Mr. Inoki, they all held Pete Roberts in really high esteem. Well, Pete took a liking to me and was incredibly helpful, but I wrestled him at 18, and I based a lot of my style on him because once I got to be an international heavyweight style, well, Pete gave me a mindset. I thought he was going to give me all kinds of wisdom, and he did. It was the best advice I ever got to this day, and I'm still trying to work on it. And I still say to people all the time, and I tell them, look, you should be working on this till you long past your career, if you don't start buying into your own BS. Because unfortunately, a lot of people start buying into their own nonsense and then think they know everything. You don't. I'm still learning every day, you know. And Mr. McMahon says that, and I'm not trying to say I copy Mr. McMahon, but when I've heard him say that, that's how I think about wrestling. But he's every day is the first day on the job, right? It's right. Let's do that. And so, but Pete Roberts put this into me at 18. So I'm wrestling somebody who I didn't think I had any right to be in the ring with on a show. And then I said, Mr. Roberts, have you got any advice for me? And he said, it's two things. And I've put these out in different forms for years. Number one, make everything you do mean something, else don't bother doing it. And that's basically try to make sense of, because in wrestling, we have to make logic out of an illogical business. Makes no sense if you think about it. But he said, try to do that. He said, you'll be working on that forever. So when we go back to all these things tying together, right? When you go back to the pins, yeah, make everything you do mean something else, don't bother doing it. What's the point of doing a pin if it's not going to try to beat somebody?
Sure.
Right. It's just one little thing, right? But that was what he said to me. And he explained it. Look, certain things of doing that may get into a bit, we get into some of that in later on. And the second thing he told me, and this is all in the same 5 minutes that he gave me, he said, every single night that you walk through the curtain, never assume that anybody knows who you are. And so I said, because I was 18, do you mind explaining that to me? He said, well, every single night, he said, could be a new person watching you, or he said, what do you do? He added to, he said, what do you do on you? He said, you're young in your career. What do you do when you go out there and like your first night for any, well, you do everything the best you can do. So he said, keep doing that. Just stop before you go through the curtain, right? And then he gave me a little explanation. How do they know that you're a wrestler? First of all, just the way you walk to the ring. Do you show that you're an actual fighter? Do you look at your opponent like you're actually trying to beat them? Do you think like you're trying to beat them? Do you just take for granted that they're going to boo you if you're supposed to be a villain? Do you take for granted that they're going to like you if you're supposed to be a blue eye, which was British talk for a babyface? Don't take anything for granted, and then you'll do your best to show why people should care about you, is basically what he was saying. And that was two incredible mindsets to get at 18. Now, I was nowhere near ready to be able to pull them off yet. And I'm still trying to work on it. Because I'm still, it's nearly 9 years since I had my last match, and I'm still kicking myself up the backside thinking, why didn't I do that when I was wrestling? And I'm right. So I can help people with mindsets with stuff. So all these fellas here, we were talking about, that they were all good lads, and they had a really good match. It was a short match. It was a good match.
Well, of course, you met Mr. Pete Roberts when you were 18 years old, and none of us are 18 years old forever. And it's a good thing that we have Blue Chew. That's right, guys. It's time to bring that summer heat into the bedroom. This episode is sponsored by Blue Chew. Mr. Regal, have you heard of Blue Chew before?
No, I haven't.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let me tell you and everybody else.
What? Pray tell. Pray tell, Matt.
Well,
no, seriously, I'm all ears.
Well, confidence can take you far in life, and it can also help in the bedroom, especially when it comes time to step up to the plate. And that's where Blue Chew comes in. Blue Chew.
See, I always thought it was about my legs because my wife said I haven't got a good jump in me, but maybe it's something else. Right, what's going on?
Well, it could be. Blue Chew is a unique online service that delivers the same active ingredients as Viagra and Cialis, but in chewable tablets and at a fraction of the cost. You can take them anytime, day or night, so you can plan ahead or be ready whenever an opportunity arises. The process is simple. Sign up at BlueChew.com, consult with one of their licensed medical providers, and once you're approved, you'll receive your prescription within days. The best part, it's all done online. So no visits to doctor's office, no awkward conversations, and no waiting in line at the pharmacy. Mr. Regal, I'm sure you can see how that could be a problem for people.
I can also say they'd be very good if you ever get sunburn, because if you take a couple before you go to bed, then the sheets won't touch the sunburn, will they? So, right.
We have found a new use for Blue Chew tablets, which they're made in the USA.
And it's the summertime, so
you're going to get that sunburn.
Yes.
So if for no other reason, to keep those sheets off of you during these hot summer months. It's made in the USA and prepared and shipped direct to your door in a discreet package. And, with Blue Chew, men everywhere are excited to see the postman, because when the package has arrived, your package...
As long as he hasn't opened the package up first, you'll know. Yeah, you'll be getting the neighbors complaining.
He might be bringing a package or a different kind of package.
Well, dear.
If he's opening up. So we all, I think, everybody, I know Mr. Regal might not look like it, or I might not look like it, but we're at that age where some people might need a little bit of help with that confidence. And if you need that extra confidence when it's time to perform, Blue Chew can help. And we've got a special deal for our listeners. Try Blue Chew free. Can you beat free, Mr. Regal? You can't.
No, you can't. Right? No. Especially for that. No. Oh, dear me. I've shelled out fortunes for all that stuff.
Try Blue Chew free when you use our promo code GENTLEMAN at checkout. Isn't that nice? Just gentlemen. Just pay $5 shipping. That's BlueChew.com, promo code GENTLEMAN, to receive your first month free. Visit BlueChew.com for more details and important safety information. And we thank Blue Chew for sponsoring the podcast. Now you're really a podcaster, Mr. Regal, because you just did a Blue Chew commercial.
Yes, I'm all in now, aren't I?
You have no choice. You're there now.
Yes.
And, speaking of all in, as we get back to the show, I think everybody who was tuning into NXT 1, Takeover 1, was all in on Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn, to me, was the most compelling person. If you ask anybody, if you ask Conrad, who's Matt's favorite wrestler, he's going to say Sami Zayn. Sami was, as a good guy, as the underdog from the underground, was kind of the face of what was going on, and the crowd was behind him. He also took your advice. I saw a thing he did on Breaking Ground where he took your advice of, what can I make from this? What can I do with this? What can I take from this? Because he was willing to give up the generico. He was willing to take that mask off and see what you had to offer. What are your experiences, maybe recruiting, scouting, working with the great Sami Zayn?
So I knew Rami, from just seeing him enough DVDs that were getting sent to me by a lot of younger wrestlers. And I met him in Toronto, I believe, and Daniel Bryan was there. Now, I can't remember if this was before Daniel Bryan got signed and he was there for some reason, or it was just after he either he was signed or he came back, but Sami was there and he was sat on the steps and I already liked him and I knew who he was, and he couldn't believe that I knew who he was without his mask on, because he was one of the reasons I really like Sami, I keep saying Sami instead of his real name, was because he, in his own way, he kept up the strength of the job. He kept that character going, and I like that mystique thing. You know, he didn't. I've heard stories from people that I know that he's been in there with people that were on the fringes of our industry, have met him, and he's not took his mask off, and he's just said a few words in Spanish. And
that's awesome.
Which is, yep, exactly. And that goes a long way with me, right? Plus, I like what he did. He came, got a tryout when it was still in Tampa at FCW, and I mentioned this before. I did have to go over certain people's heads to get him hired, because there were some people that didn't see what I saw, and I it's worked out far more than I ever thought. Not that I thought there was any limit on Sami, but I knew that he was one of the people that could, the way things were going, and if you look at the landscape of the wrestlers that were out there, I knew there was something special about him. And I don't know what that is that I have, but there's certain people I just knew. But he didn't exactly, he certainly doesn't, you wouldn't say he was a body guy now, but he looks a lot more, he has a lot more body now than he did then.
Yeah, he's put on a little bit of bulk. Yeah,
yeah,
he's put on a little bit since then.
Right. But there was just something magic about him. And having talked to him, I knew there was going to be somebody with a short conversation and little snippets of conversation over the tryout. I knew, when I say these things, I knew I had a hunch, right? And I learned to trust my own instincts on this, and it worked out, thankfully, which makes me seem a lot smarter than I am, or a lot of people think I am. It's just sometimes I have a hunch. And I knew he'd end up being an incredibly good talker. And because he certainly wasn't known for it then, was he? Because he never said anything more than "see" all the time.
No, right.
Right.
Yeah.
But just the way he talked and the way he told a story, whatever story he was telling, and the animation, he had a nickname from me, the Juggler, because when he used to talk, he used to do this all the time with his hands. And I knew that and it wasn't how we started off this conversation today. It was the wrong kind of body language.
It's just nervous energy, right? It's just nervous energy coming out the wrong time.
But he had the right kind of body language when he was telling a story. So I knew, just hearing him tell little bits of whatever he was telling to people and me, or talking to me about his time. He told me a story about his time in England and getting into a fight once at Blackpool Winter Gardens, because there's a lot of concerts go on there. I believe, I could be wrong here, but there's a White Stripes album, and it's on film called White Stripes Under Blackpool Lights. That's out on video. Oh, I won't.
It's out.
It's out. It might have been. I could have this wrong because there was somebody I knew went to that, and it might have been him. But I remember him telling me about a fight he nearly got in. There's also a big punk festival on there every year called Rebellion at the Winter Gardens in Blackpool, and it might have been there. So I could have this wrong, but I don't know why I think it's that White Stripes concert. And he told me about, and it was just the way he was telling me that I had this hunch that if he puts the time in, he's going to end up very quickly becoming a very good talker. And with his ability to make people like him, that's something.
What it is, right?
That's the thing. That was the key to that. People like him, and people, and the same. I think we've touched on this in other. I've done so many interviews recently. It may not have been this actual show, but the people who can make people really hate them or really like them are also naturally or with a lot of work sometimes, but people trust you if they're either liking you or even in our job when they hate you, they really hate you, they're trusting you with their time. They trust you to make you, to bring an emotion out of them. And usually the people that can do that can switch it and make you hate them. Because if they've invested their time in you loving them loving you, and then you do the right thing, you can make them hate you. Sure. Roddy Piper was the perfect example of that. Okay. So I knew that being around him a little bit, once I started watching him, and once he got into the system, he's got this likable quality. So we're seeing it now that he knows how to make people hate him as well, because they were so invested in liking him. Doesn't matter what he was doing, he's just he knows how to connect with an audience. We've definitely said this on this show. It's the two things that matters, right? Number one, getting the promoter to hire you, whether they like you or not doesn't matter, as long as you're getting paid. But the main thing is connecting with your audience, and he connected with his audience, and he found a way of connecting at whatever level. And he did it on many different levels as El Generico. He'd do it with his incredible wrestling, but with the entertainment aspect of it as well, which is another layer, which is, some people only have one or the other. He had both of those things going on, and not being able to express himself to earn that kind of love from an audience, which is really difficult. So everything that we saw on NXT, and we saw it come alive, and once he started getting TV time, and it was just magic. Sami Zayn was sheer magic in the Arrival show that predated Takeover. He had the match with Cesaro, and that was you just, it's as good as it gets, right? And it's what was modern day wrestling at the time, or the previous 10 years of it all coming together. But both of them had traveled to different parts of the world and picked up little bits of everything, and they just brought that together, and it was fantastic. And then he just continued on, and continued on, and it helped with that. He's a big lover of ska. Well, ska music, I don't care who you are, you've got to be completely devoid of any emotion if you don't hear ska.
It's one of the all-time great theme songs.
Yes,
that theme
but
song
it also
is
it's a joyous feeling to listen, whether you want to admit it or not, or whether you like it or not. There's something about it. It's one of those it's a style of music that gets your heart rate going. And so everything that Sami could have done, he did. as far as making himself the star that he became, and that was before he ever got to the WWE and NXT. And then all these other elements, and once, you know, he just knew what he was doing. And I mean, there's times when we're gonna get, it'll be hopefully a ways away, but when, you know, the night that he faced Nakamura for the first time, that night, that was the electricity in that building was unbelievable.
We were in that building, buddy, and it was something else. I'd nothing like it. Never seen anything like it.
Right.
Never.
And that was before the fella even. Rami got his, but this was, whatever people say, you know, there's only so many people look at wrestling sites and journalism. There was the beat, you know, and you hear names and that, but Naka, this is pretty much an unknown entity. He was over with because the audience knew who he was, but there was something more. And when he walked out, I mean, it was just the anticipation of him walking out, and with Sami just sat there in awe, and he was sat in like on the bottom rope, just looking in sheer awe. It was perfect.
I'm getting chills just remembering it,
right?
And you describing it, because that's how. Even the ending of that match, but it goes to say Sami Zayn is somebody who has that rare quality in 2022, or even back then. People care if he wins or loses, and that's a very rare thing. You know, they want him to win, and when he's a good guy, and when he's a bad guy, they want him to lose. And to me, that's a rarity.
That's a rare quality, and then that's he's something very, very special, and I can't say enough good about what he did for NXT, what he did for independent wrestling before he got there. The way, you know, I mean, he busted his backside to get all over the world and did everything he had to do. The things that he's done on his own time to help people, which very admirable, and the way he's, you know, there's a lot of things can be said about whatever happened in NXT and the transition to the main roster WWE. Sami Zayn figured it out. Sami Zayn has figured it out, and he's a top WWE superstar, and I just have nothing but admiration for him, because that to figure out and how to connect with your audience at whatever is given, he finds a way to do it. And it's his story. He might have different stories to me. I'm just looking as an outsider looking in. I never had any doubt when he left NXT. There was always not always, but sometimes there was a doubt. Are they going to work out there? I had full confidence in Sami Zayn, and knowing that he wasn't the kind of person that they would normally, you know, if you'd have said 5 years before that, oh, Sami Zayn's going to go on the main roster.
Right, yeah.
And here's another thing we mentioned before. Absolute, complete and utter credit to John Cena for having a match with Sami Zayn and making him quickly mean something to the WWE audience if they'd never seen him before. He made him that night by the performance that he could have been very selfish and not given Sami, made Sami the way he made him, as he did with all of those guys that went up, the Kevins and all those people. There are very few people that would have ever done that. And John went out and did that and made those people care about them.
Of course, his opponent in that match is Tyler Breeze. We've seen a lot of his story on Breaking Ground, and a lot of people know his story that he, you know, tried on a few different things, and it really did hit. Like it's a lot like the Adam Rose thing, where when Adam Rose first came out as Adam Rose, people chanted "This is awesome" before he even wrestled. And Tyler Breeze, that seemed to be a perfect character for him. Can
Yeah.
you describe kind of what you thought of it when he started doing those kind of promos in promo class?
Yeah, he was. I just want to give Tyler Breeze and Xavier Woods. This is a separate thing. I want to give both of them a thank you, because I've heard from a lot of talent that when it's overwhelming when you arrive either at NXT or in what used to be FCW or whatever. It's overwhelming. You doesn't matter what you've been doing before. All of a sudden, there's a lot going on, and you've got, there's a lot of people, get a lot of voices to listen to. You've got a lot of things that you've preconceived notions that you've got to get through. Things you've got things that you have got to get through. There's all kinds going on. I know that Xavier Woods and Tyler Breeze helped a lot of the people that came in the door there. So thank you to both of them. They'd always help any of the newer talent that were coming in and try and help them figure things out. So that's number one. Tyler Breeze just hit again. It was all this magic that was happening all at one time, and whatever that character was, he figured it out, and it worked. I had a lot of fun doing stuff with him. There's a lot of times when we were doing backstage stuff in my office in Full Sail, and him just being there and being in the background, and we had little things where it was so good and fantastic, and at his job, just great. Just always did a good job, always a pro, always helpful, always enjoyed being around him, and I liked it a lot. And it worked out the way it worked out, but he had warm a bit now in my reptile room. It's always did a great job, and knew his character, and it clicked with the audience, and just another great match. I'm not going to break down these matches because there's other people who have all these ideas of what's good and what's bad. I see two good pros having a really good match, getting their audience involved, and getting, it's just great stuff, and setting a good standard for everybody. That if you like, they're good people to, if say if you're a wrestler, young wrestler, and you're not 6'8" and you're not, heavyweight, or you want a certain style, you can't get much better than watch those two in this match, and watch how that they build that match, and then and do what they do in it, and it's just great stuff to watch. So happy for them.
Something about that match, and it's something I noticed about Sami actually the first time in the Dallas show, and it maybe you can explain it to me. When you watch wrestling and you see someone do a move that's not their finisher, the fans know it's not going to be over. But everybody always goes for that blue thunder bomb. Every time Sami does that blue thunder bomb, they think the pin's coming. And Dallas, the place erupted when he kicked out of a move he's never beaten anybody with. What is about the way that Sami or anybody sets up a move like that to make people believe this could be it, even though that's not a finisher?
All right, this is what I'm going to make anybody who's been paying attention think. The move's one thing. It's the detail of building up to the move that makes the move special. If you listen earlier on, we talked a lot about the close-up stuff that nobody's going to give you credit for, right? It's because of the way he sets that up and the way he does little things that you shouldn't notice he's doing them. It's just that he does them, and it builds. It's like you can be the best writer in the world, but if you don't put and have a great point at the end of the paragraph you're writing. If you don't put the right words in before it, nobody's going to get to the incredible finish of that paragraph. He does a lot of little things, just the way he moves, the way he reacts to things, the way he does certain things at certain times. And that's why that pays off. Again, I don't want to give away his secrets about doing that, but I've already talked about that in this. You're going to go, it's the build up to it. Sometimes it's a short build up, but because of things he's done previously in the match, you are invested in him as you want him to win. That just doesn't come. You can't just go out there and do formula stuff. It's little tiny things that make it all mean something so that you actually care. Okay? I will give you an example. The greatest, I don't like the term selling. I believe once you get to a certain point, you need to learn to react. We all start off selling in this job. When you learn to react, it's a different thing. We haven't got time to go into too much of this today. But in my opinion, the greatest, if you want to call it seller, but the greatest reactor in the entire industry was The Undertaker. Especially when he came back with a more fighting style. Going into WrestleMania against Shawn Michaels, 2 matches, at that time, you knew that he wasn't going to lose, right? It was just, nobody thought the streak was going to end, right? Got to that point. It was at that point, but wasn't going to lose. He's a man who's dead, 6'8", and dead, and doesn't get to react with his face. And doesn't get to react with his face. But he does such a good job, and it's not noticeable of little. He knows the difference between getting hit in the ribs than hitting the stomach and hitting just caught, and he reacts ever so slightly to it. You know, going in there, now put all this into context. You know that he's not going to lose. You know that he's 6'8" and he's dead and he's not going to sell with his face. Why do people go insane when there's a false finish and he kicks out? Because of the build-up to that. And that's in a different league that a lot of people need to get to, instead of just it's studying that kind of stuff. What are the in-between things? What are the little, how do they get you to have sympathy for them? How do you get to have sympathy for a man who's already dead and you know is not going to lose? Right? So that's that out of the way. Now, why do they care about the Blue Thunder Bomb? Because, first of all, it's an impressive looking move. That's obvious, right? Yes. But it's the build up to it and the little things that nobody's going to give you praise for. And that's the problem. A lot of people nowadays, all they want is praise. And they want to be told how great they are and that they're the best at this and they're the best at that. And they want all these reviews about themselves. So I've never, ever read a review about myself. Ever. I didn't need to by the time I came. Well, there was no such thing in Europe. But when I came back and I had a group of fellas that were all brilliant, if they didn't tell me off or I knew I was doing okay. If I came back through the curtain and certain wrestlers, when it came to America, if Ric Flair or Arn Anderson or Ricky Steamboat or Paul Orndorff was a huge person who couldn't, can't thank enough for what it helping me. adjust to coming over here, and so many others. But if they didn't tell me anything was wrong, and I knew they were watching, I don't need anybody else telling me. Right? They're the people that are better than me. So I go to them. If you're worried about it, you're worrying about, I've got to get the next big move and I've got to try and get this, I've got to try and get that, instead of the quality of whatever, right? And again, everybody has a different mindset, but the in-between stuff is not going to get you any praise. The detail of whatever Sami did to get him there isn't the stuff that people praise him for. I'm telling you that now is that's what the difference maker is with him. It's the in-between stuff. And then he has the spectacular stuff, the illusions. But he also is laying down a lot of close-up magic before you get to the illusion. So it's not just illusion, illusion, illusion. Because if you are just illusion, 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 you can get a good run out of this. But then there's another thing that you might only last so long at it. You might get a 5-year run in Vegas instead of a Penn and Teller run. Right.
It's a fundamental.
This is a little, again, me not trying to give too much away, but I'm telling you the difference is the in-between stuff. Pete Robertson, we mentioned him before, Terry Rudge, Fit Finlay, Marty Jones, Johnny South, all these people in my life Skull Murphy, when I was younger. Will your wrestling still hold up in 30 years? That's what they used to be in their different forms of it. Can people still watch it? Well, you can watch any of their stuff from the 80s and the 70s and still see that it holds up. And then you're not seeing the tricks, right? And if you don't care about that, that's okay. And if you got yourself over without worrying about that, that's okay. You don't have to listen to me. But that's only a small group of people that can get themselves over without having all these little tricks. Sami Zayn has had to work because of what's he got going for him, right? Rami, I'm not apologizing, but he's a normal looking fella, airy fella that didn't have a body and wore a mask so he couldn't show his face, and you couldn't see the, again, going back to the Undertaker, he had a mask on and he got himself over. It's hard to get yourself over with a mask on. If you have to use your body to then you haven't got that one thing that is the easiest thing to get sympathy with or to show anger with. You take that away. Rey Mysterio, all the great mask wrestlers, luchadors all over the world, anybody that can get themselves over without this, they do it with this, just with their body motion, the way they react to things, the way they move. Sometimes it's moves, but it's all that stuff that you've got to work on. Otherwise, one day, maybe, I hope it doesn't, because I've seen plenty that it doesn't. In fact, they get worse as they get older, but they don't. It doesn't matter. They get over, and that's all that really matters, is getting over. But for the majority of people, it's keeping up in your game and keeping working on your tricks and keeping something about it all. Sami Zayn has got over against all the odds and got himself over, and now look at him. Now look at the he's just doing stuff with Logan Paul at WrestleMania.
Amazing stuff.
Right. And look at him when he goes out there. You can't not look at him. You can't not take your eyes off him. And it's just him. It's just and look what he's got to work with. He's just a normal fella. If you look at him, if you just stood there and looked at him, you'd go, "Oh, him, a wrestler, really?" And that's the truth. I'll say it out loud. You go, I saw him straight, him. Oh, not as soon as he starts moving, I don't. Now he's a wrestler. Now he's something special. So that's my bit about him. And Tyler did his bit as well. Fantastic.
They're both great. And both a huge part of what we all remember as maybe the golden age or the beginning of the golden age of NXT.
Yeah. Seeing Paige. I mean, that was another thing. That was a really weird thing to me because
Right.
Paige came into the ring as the WWE Divas champion at the time. And, you know, I'm going to, so we don't have to go into this again. I'm going to have to give Paige and Emma the highest compliments I can give them is that they were the two people before the Four Horsewomen and everybody else. Paige and Emma were the two ladies that set all that in motion as far as being where everything went from then onwards. And it's weird to see that takeover, and because if you'd have asked me, I wouldn't have thought Paige had gone to the main roster by then. You know, it's just, that's how quick all the time goes. And I remember being there the first night she debuted in New Orleans, and I remember talking to her afterwards and going, "Oh, this is it." You know, like, it's time to, the ride's about to start. Whatever you've just done in NXT, the ride's about to start now. But we're probably not going to get to that until another episode. But I'm saying it right now. Paige and Emma were the foundation of whatever came out of, and the incredible run of ladies that came through NXT and all that, the happenings afterwards. They were the two starting ladies that sort of got attention on everybody, and they never got to do a takeover. You'd think they would have done, right? You'd think they were part of that, but it was before their time.
Right.
I mean, sorry, it was after their time was before takeover started. But Paige was actually on the main roster and the Divas champion. That's it. That's incredible. So yeah, but you know, when I say this, and you're like, oh, I wouldn't. That's because that's what I was like a lot last night. I was thinking, oh, I was going to see this, going to see that, but that was the one thing that was messing my head up because I couldn't put, like, how is not only is she not on this takeover, she's already on the main roster and she's the Divas champion, and that was that wasn't sitting. My brain wasn't working. I thinking, am I forgetting things? No, she was already the Divas champion. Wow, that was a great thing to see. And she got to talk about it, and that was nice. I thought the world of her. Still do.
Of course,
I haven't seen her for a long time.
As we're taping, it's very current kind of news because Paige just announced she was going to leave the WWE recently, and then, like, literally the same day, we're watching her on NXT with the Divas Championship. With NXT Takeover, of course, you said you started commentary. You seem very happy doing it. It seems like a very engaged situation. We had Mojo Rawley coming out potentially for a match. Alexander Rusev coming out. Rusev is pretty new to NXT, and he's no longer using the board where he wrote the name down and all that, but he comes out and just destroys Mojo Rawley very shortly. People, you know, must have really liked Rusev. I don't know if I got it at first, but man, I tell you, within a very short time, he is wrestling John Cena at WrestleMania.
Right. Because he looks the part, he acts the part, and he believes in what he's doing. And he's, again, it's finding whatever it is that works for you. Well, he's got a lot of things going for him, working for him, right? Just the way he looks. He stands there, you know, I'm not going to say what he's in. Well, I will say he's a very polite, nice fella, right?
He seems very likable in real life. He seems very likable.
Right. So you've seen that.
Yeah.
Not when he walks out through that curtain, he isn't. You go, oh my God, this fella's going to kill somebody. Because he believes it, and the way he does things, that's what he does. That's what he is. He is that fantastic. And there's nothing better than you know, when I watched that last night, I'm thinking, it's only a few years ago, but would you can you still get away with that American bashing stuff? I don't know. I don't know. Times have changed, certainly in the last few years, right? Yeah. I mean, I made a living off it for years. That was my whole act. Most of it was American bashing, but it works, right? Sometimes people like to think that they're all politically correct until they see a flag, and then all of a sudden they start USA chants, not realizing that's pretty not quite the politest thing to do to a foreign person. You know, if you're ramming it down your throat, you don't like their country, should be accepting of all countries. But put them into a wrestling ring and throw a flag about, and all of a sudden all those models they may think they have go out the window, and it's all about USA and knocking the foreigners, right? So I can say that because I'm one of the foreigners.
Absolutely. Rusev, of course,
fantastic,
very short, really great job, and Mojo played his part as well. And that brings us to the first of the two big title matches. One thing that struck me about NXT, you know, I told you I went to NXT San Jose, which was the first big show they ever did. I remember they announced the following match is for the women's championship, and there was a roar, and I'd never heard that before. I never heard someone's. It was before the introductions, you know, women's championship, and the place went crazy because they wanted to see this. And this match is the foundation of that. As you said, of course, Paige and Emma came first, but Charlotte and Natalya, what a huge moment in wrestling history, considering what Charlotte has become. And what a huge moment for Natalya to really kind of take her place as what her job became to be, which is kind of this gatekeeper for that next level for the Divas.
I hope she takes this as a compliment. She's very much her role has become what my role was, which was to make people and be a good pro and do whatever you are asked to do. And you have to be, you can't be selfish when you do that. And you have to know what you're doing, and you have to be able to, you know, just do whatever's asked and make it work and make people and be a good pro. And she's a great pro. That must have been a wonderful for both ladies. I'm going to apologize now to both of them if they happen to hear this, because it was still ingrained in my head, and I was believe me, a big proponent of making women's wrestling, bringing it to the forefront, because there's a complete sadly lost part of British wrestling because of silly people in charge of television who would not let, for 33 years of British wrestling, let any ladies wrestle on TV. And there was an incredible team of ladies, and it's ridiculous. So with NXT Star now, it was with everybody, you know, it was just finding the right people, and Paige and Emma started, and then, you know, Charlotte was already there, and getting and the rest is history, right? We know where it went. But what an incredible thrill that must have been for both ladies to have, for Natalya to have Brett there, and you know, her uncle her uncle's it's Bret Hart. I mean, and then Charlotte to have her dad there, and you know, imagine the pressure on both of them. Oh dear me, it's brutal. The only time I used to get nervous was when we were in England and I had people that I knew there, right? Not having your dad, Ric Flair, and having your uncle being Bret Hart, and then stood at the ringside, and then you've got to go out and follow the matches that have just been on, and they go out and have that incredible match. I can't even imagine what that was like for them. And they had to, on top of everything they had to do, they had that pressure thrown on them, which is something that I know about. You know, I don't know if a person who's not involved in this would understand how scary that is. You know, just, and I can't. I've had some of the wrestlers that I know there, and I'm a bit that I knew when I was younger. I was a bit, but if my parents were there or anything, it's just nerve wracking. But to have your uncle and your dad next to the ring, and them being the incredible, you know,
them being who they are.
Yeah,
you know?
I mean, wow.
You know,
So
it's not just your uncle and your dad. It's freaking Ric Flair and Bret Hart. You know, like it's what amazing.
What's good is because I know they would have been both Rick and Bret, and I don't know Bret that well, but I do know Rick, and they could have been that, which they weren't. They'd have been, if they were offering any advice or saying anything, it would have been positive to help their daughter and their niece through the match. And I don't know. You'd have to ask. It's not my story because I don't know if they did say anything, but not there trying to, you know, tell them anything was wrong. You know, because they both tried to help. Because I know Rick certainly was like that with me when I was wrestling him when I was younger. And I know nothing but good about with the way that I know Bret has helped younger people. So, but fantastic stuff. Great match. I apologize to them both again because I kept saying Divas thing at one time because it was still I was getting used to it. That was it. I don't think I got to that bit. I was saying I was part of this wanting to make the ladies have a big part and show that they could go out and wrestle. Because I don't think I've mentioned that before on here, but there was a lot of great women's wrestling going on in the WWE. Unfortunately, not a lot of it on TV. Because Fit Finlay was taking all the ladies and you know,
and he was taking non-wrestlers and turning them into wrestlers in real time too, right?
and making them all, and they were on live events. There was some incredible stuff going on. It just didn't. There was some, but not a lot of it on TV. So we wanted to change that, and so this is one of those things, you know, because you see. There's some lovely little clips of Sasha there when she still hadn't, you know, she hadn't quite found the boss character then, and then, you know, we've already talked. We've seen Becky in the Rosebuds, and Bailey hadn't showed up at the time, or certainly wasn't on TV at that time. Maybe she was, but I don't think so. But whatever it was, this is, you know. Just a wonderful match, and it was great. And so hats off to those ladies. It's great.
People talk a lot about, of course, Charlotte. You know, I've had conversations about her being such a great athlete, of course, and having the pedigree she has, being Ric Flair's daughter, and what pressure that is. But we saw a little side of her that I think people don't talk about a lot in this match. She has this ability to really tap into real emotion. She seems to get really angry or really upset, and it really comes across, and it happened in this match. Can you talk a little bit about that ability to kind of tap into real emotion in a match and have it come across?
I've probably said this before. If I haven't, you'll hear it more than once if you keep listening to this podcast. And if you're watching this, I said this the other night to somebody, I won't say who, but a big name wrestler. And a lot of people who've been to seminars with me, at the end of the day, and this is for the majority of wrestlers, this job boils down to three things. It starts in your head, and it goes into your heart, and then it comes out. I always point at the eyes because it comes out through your eyes. You've got to really think it, you've got to feel it, and then you show the emotion. And you can either on your face or through your eyes or through body language. If one of those things isn't right, after a while, people figure you out. You've got to, you know, she very quickly learned, and I would imagine it was coming from real sports that she'd been in. She knew what real competition was. She's not playing at that. She was never playing at that. She, which if you come from something like that, experiences get you to somewhere. Playing at something is something else. If you can tap into that, and I know that if you ever talk to me, I don't know if we ever had this conversation, myself and Charlotte, but she's got a dad. She don't need to talk to me. Or she'd have had Dusty to talk to, who used to talk in the same. It's about mindsets. If you can tap into real emotion that you know and feel, and you can put yourself in a place and feel it, if it's in your brain and you can feel it in your heart, it's going to come out on your face if you're trying to portray something. Like you see, I see through a lot of wrestlers because then I know they've never really been in certain situations, because if they're trying to portray them, they just don't come out right. You might, if you don't know what that real situation is, they may be able to pull it off with you, but they can't with me, because I've lived through a lot of things, right? more than my fair share. And I can see when somebody's really angry, and sometimes, and I know how to just flick into that. Anybody that knows how to do that, right? So I think that was probably the key. Not only have you got around the people that can tell you that, but she lived through a lot of real emotion, some real life emotion, and real competition. So when you're a competitive person and all you care about is winning, and then you're portraying a professional fighter, we've talked about this, a professional fighter that is trying to beat somebody, it's a lot easier to show that emotion. You're not playing at it. Back to what I said before, you're reacting. You're not selling, you're reacting. And so I would think that is why. She knows how to tap into that very well, because she's lived through a lot of life.
Absolutely. And it was a great match, and it was, you know, a really good crowning of the queen, Charlotte Flair, who we just has loved. She's gone on to such a great career, and she's such a cool person, and she's going to, she still has a lot of future ahead of her.
It's a weird thing, because I remember being at Bobby Eaton's house once, and then we ended up, I don't know, there was my children, Arn's children, and Rick's children, and they were all running around singing Oombop by the way, that awful record that was out at the time. But I remember her, she was about 7 then, and so, you know, I've known her. It's weird because there's so many of these people now, like with Arn's lad and with David Finlay, and that I've known since they were little children, and it makes me feel old, for one, because the time's gone so quick, but to watch them grow up and now be in this job and be doing it, and my lad the same, you know, and then watching him, it's like I'm watching my lad, but he's not my lad, and I'm watching Charlotte, but there's a little girl that was running around singing Oombop. You know, it's just it's a strange thing. It's nice. It's nice to see them. It's nice to see they're all getting on, and in Charlotte's case, that's great, because she's you know, and another thing with her, she's had to get through all that. You imagine the pressure put on her. You're Ric Flair's daughter. Oh, blimey. Natalya as well. You know, it goes through all them. You know, you're going out there. You got all that pressure on you, and you haven't even started. The day she walked in the door there, you imagine how she had to try and feel. I'm Ric Flair's daughter. I'm Bret Hart's niece. Oh, right. So they're just people who are going to expect that they know 1,000 times more than they could possibly know at that particular point, and all that pressure's put on you. Oof, terrible.
Never and you had a lot of that going around in NXT. You had Joe Hennig, and you had all these other guys.
Yeah, a lot of people.
I'm Kurt Hennig's son. Okay, show me what you got, bad boy. Right.
My lad still doesn't tell anybody he's my son, and he's doing pretty well. You know, like he's coming into himself, but he still doesn't like anybody knowing that he's mine, because he knows that. You know, from that day on because he's wanted to earn it on his own. But I purposely take the pressure off yourself as much as possible so you can get on with learning your job, right? So it's that's another thing they've all had to deal with.
Yeah, that's another mindset entirely.
Right.
And I tell you what, we are coming to the end of this episode, but also this Takeover one, this, groundbreaking event that followed 35 or 36 more after, and it closed out with the NXT champion Adrian Neville against Tyson Kidd. Adrian Neville's a guy.
Oh,
it almost seems like WWE would only see him in that way, like the Pac character that he is now. I don't know if you would ever get a chance to do that, because when you're that height and you look like that, you can do those things. It's almost like you have to be the kind of character he was in NXT.
I think he's as good as anyone walking the earth. I think there was a time before he came that he wasn't so sure about himself because he'd never done any promos. He'd made a name for himself in Japan, and I met him in London, and I spent a couple of days with him, and he came, and I always knew he was it was just, first of all, he's got that thing that we talked about with Sami before, that Sami's managed all these things, but not looking like what you expect a wrestler to look like. Adrian Neville, I don't see anything to do with his height or pack.
No,
I look like, because I know, me and him have a lot of the same things as far as music and youth culture. It sounds funny me saying youth culture, but we like the same youth culture stuff from Britain. And he looks like somebody who's gonna smash the granny out of somebody, and he's very assuming and quiet and polite, but I think he can. He's just quiet lad. He looks the part. His face tells a story. I really, really rate him, and I think he's fantastic. And I can't say enough good about him, and I can't say enough good about the way he carries himself and as a pro. And this match, Tyson Kidd is another person. TJ Wilson. Unbelievable. Unfortunately, his career was cut short, but incredible pro. This is what the job's all about. It's got nothing to do with their size. It's got just a fantastic match with two people who believe that they're professional wrestlers fighting for a prize, and that everything made sense and everything looked right, and you can't see through any tricks, and there's nothing looks not right, and it all makes sense, and it makes sense in a modern style. And and there'll be people who'll say, well, I did this or that, and leave them to their outdated silly thoughts. Fantastic match, fantastic pros doing a brilliant job, and that's what the job's all about. And they're the kind of people that make me proud to be in this job. They're proper pro wrestlers and fantastic at what they do. And I have my own thoughts on different things. I once he learned to talk, and that I don't think he gets enough credit for his talking ability, because he became incredibly good at talking. He's a very, very good promo person. the one unfortunate thing about him is that he is so good and so reliable and so much of a pro that can be a hindrance to you in some respects, because people rely on you and know that you're not going to be any trouble, and you can hit anything that needs doing. You can have a match with anybody. It can sometimes be a frustrating thing, I would think.
Do you get taken for granted, or
I talk to people a lot. There's a few people like him, but he's rates up there. Cesaro's another one. You can look at it as getting taken for granted, but what it is take it as a huge compliment, because you are trusted by the people paying you to be a professional. They know that they can trust you with anything, to do whatever they need to do, to hit your times, to be whatever you need to do. And it's an unfortunate byproduct of being a good pro. Again, a lot of people might not understand that, but it's frustrating for them. But believe me, the people that are paying them, they're not looking at it. They're looking at it as you've got an exceptional pro who can do everything, and I can rely on them to do that. And that is something that happens. Within my first few months of being in WCW, I had Arn Anderson and Paul Orndorff come up to me and say, "Well, you're screwed." And I was like, "Oh, why?" He said, "Well, because you can do this, and you're always going to be relied on to make sure put people over." And I think it is a problem for them, but you could also, both Pac and TJ as well, you can make them into anything at any time, and people will buy into it. If you made Pac now, if you decided to make him whatever you wanted to make him now, nobody would question it, because he's so credible at what he does, and he can back it up with his talking. He can back it up with whatever he does. You know, he's every time he does flying moves. There's a lot of people do flying moves, but a lot of times they don't. Like his flying moves look like they're gonna cripple you. When you know what I mean. Everything he does is
that back kick, man. It looks brutal every time. That back kick looks like he's gonna kill somebody every single time.
That he's in a different league and world of how good he is. That's my opinion. A lot of people might not want to hear that, because they all buy into their own stuff about how good they are, and they are good, but he's different because of whatever it is he's got. I really hope to see a lot more of him doing matches with because there's such a huge amount of great talent in AEW. I mean, there's so many good people there, and he should be on with all of them every week doing something. And it doesn't have to. He just writes it. It's just you don't need. It's just quality. There was a thing in WCW in 1996 where there was a fantastic angle at the end with the NWO. But if you go back and watch, there was a lot of quality matches on. And they were just thrown to, and I was part of that with Eddie, Chris, Dean, all the luchadors. And there was an hour and 40 minutes of that show where there was some incredible talent from all over the world wrestling each other. And they could just be thrown together at 5 to 8 at night. It didn't matter. Well, and you're going to have a stand-out match. Well, he's one of those kind of people. And there's a lot of people in AEW that can do that. He's that. It doesn't have to be about stories sometimes. You just give the people a credible match, because at the end of the day, that's the story. The story is that there's no such thing as not having a story in wrestling. The story is I've got to beat that person in front of me. right? That's the story. Anything else you get to work with is a bonus. The story is there's two competitors and one of them has to win. And if they know how to go out there and actually make it look like they're trying to beat each other, that's a story in itself. It doesn't need any more writing than that. And sometimes that's all you need. Because there's enough stuff going to be going on with stories and different stuff. Sometimes you just need credible matches to keep the strength of the job. And he's that person that can do that with a group of loads of other people. And you know, I'm part of a group that's what they're doing. Whatever they do is credible. There's a little bit of a story going on, but whoever they face, it's a credible professional wrestling match that gets people excited and gets people talking. Well, he's one of them people. So I think we've probably run out of time today, but we've touched on a lot of topics.
Oh yeah, but the topics have been great, you know. And to close this out, of course, Neville, I think it's an easy comparison to make, but reminds me of a updated Dynamite Kid, and what he's doing now is what Dynamite Kid could have been if he would have stayed healthy and would have kept going the way he was going, and to watch Pac become
it's what Dynamite Kid did anyway. You go back and watch his body of work, right? You know what I mean? It's only I was watching him when I was 6 or 7 and he was 16. I was watching him from when he first was on TV at 16, right? And I was watching him live every 2 weeks. That I used to go to my local wrestling was there, and I was watching him at 16 until he went to Calgary. I got to see him. So he had an incredible body of work. That's what he was doing. He was laying down from day one, credible wrestling matches in whatever style it was. Well, no matter what company he went for, his body of work still holds up well. You can go back and watch. You'll be able to watch Neville's. Pac. You'll be able to go back and watch him, and everything he does is credible in whatever style he's doing. You know, because at first it was a bit of a different style, but once he got whatever he's doing, is brilliant. So,
and of course, not to gloss over TJ Wilson.
No, again, fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Just a great wrestler, and really the match worked because of his story. The story it told of him. Of course, Neville's looks like this world beater at this point, but you know, TJ is trying to reboot his career,
and beat him. And you didn't for a second think that wasn't two people trying to beat each other.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing. It's what you watch wrestling for. If you just watch that, you go, there's two fellas trying to beat each other here. That's the story, and there was no doubt that there was times when, you know, anytime there was any kind of a pinfall or anything, it would look right. It was right, and everything was right about that from a professional standpoint, and it was fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
And Takeover 1 was a fantastic, I guess you call them live event now, but pay-per-view at the time or network special. And we told you guys, this was going to be a different kind of podcast. This has been a review of a pay-per-view like no other, where you got to hear the insight of pins and of characters and of facial expressions. And I particularly like the mind, heart, and eyes part. But I hope you enjoy talking about this. I hope it's what you want to do, because I want this to be the best version of the podcast that you want to do. So I hope you enjoyed talking about this today, Mr. Regal.
I did, absolutely. This is exactly what I'd like to do. Yes, it was great. And it was great to watch that and watch how good of a show. Because sometimes you think these, you know, you hear this number 36 takeovers. That held up. That was absolutely. It was fantastic. Yeah.
It held up. I think that's the title of this episode. And we will see you soon. Of course, you can follow Mr. Regal over at Real King Regal on Twitter. You can follow the show at Gentleman Regal. And if you can follow me at Matt Coon Music. But most importantly, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. If you're on iTunes, give us a review. Let us know what you think of it. And we will see you next week on Gentleman Villain with William Regal.
Thank you.